Hey, Juliana, great to have you here today. Thanks for joining us and spending a little time talking about supplier auditing.
Thank you for having me, Jeff.
Right on. Well, let's jump right in. No softball question this morning to get started. So can you describe to me a little bit about your approach when we start working with a supplier who's maybe not familiar with Revenew, has never been audited before, or is not open, or receptive to being audited? Tell me a little bit about how we make sure that we keep those supplier relationships strong between the client and the supplier while also executing on the work scope that we've been hired to do.
That's a great question, Jeff. And as you mentioned, it's something that is at the forefront of our clients' minds. These suppliers are extremely important to them. And, when talking to supply chain, they're often concerned. A third party is going to come in. They're not going to be as concerned about my relationship with the vendor. And one of the things that I like to say is, and really the biggest reason why Revenew, I believe, is the right fit for vendor audits. We're performing audits across multiple industries. We work with these suppliers time and time again. There are vendors that we audit 10 times a year for various clients of ours. So as a company and leading the audit planning team, I also want to make it as easy as possible on my team when dealing with this vendor. If we upset a supplier, the next time we're going to audit them, our work and our process is going to be a lot more difficult as well. The supplier maybe not be happy working with Revenew again.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Like if you're disrupting their business too, right? Just the supplier side, we think about the client side, but the supplier's looking at it and going, oh, this could be really disruptive to me as well. So, and like you say, we've got a vested interest in making sure we do it well. So the next time we knock on the door, that they're not running away or putting up roadblocks for us, that they're like, okay, this went well the last time. Let's get it done.
Yeah, and it's not only important during the audit planning, data gathering side of it, but also during the audit execution. I know it's something that our auditors spend. They're focused on making sure that the vendor is comfortable with the process, that there's open communication. We want, as part of that process, to have that where the vendors are hearing about what our auditors seeing. We're asking questions. There should never be surprises at the end. We want it to be a collaborative effort where the supplier walks away at the end of the day with more clarity on their contracts and how they can change things on their side. And the same thing for our customers.
It's always interesting to me how a big part of our culture is transparency, right? Whether we're talking like internally or externally with our clients and our suppliers, transparency is really key. And I think that transparency demystifies, auditing, right? And that is such a big key to making sure that those supplier relationships remain strong, before, during, and after the audit process. Okay, I'm going to ask you a little bit of a tougher one here because I think a lot of our prospective clients would like to know. Tell me a time where you had a really tough one with a supplier where it didn't start well and it was really crunchy as you went through the audit, and you had to navigate your way through all of that and still deliver a great result for the client and preserve that supplier relationship. So think back into the archives, dig, and tell me a great story about how that happened and what you did to manage your way through it.
All right, I have one that comes to mind, and I'm going to get a little bit technical here, but I think that suppliers have a lot of concern when it comes to the audit process and sampling and extrapolation. It's an area of our business that we spend a significant amount of time educating the suppliers and our clients as well on that process and the fairness of it, how it has been tested and validated. Some of the most difficult conversations have been with suppliers that are unwilling to deliver what we call line item data, where we know that it is available, but they just, as part of the audit process, don't want to deliver it. But at the same time, have significant issues with extrapolation. So my team spends a lot of time educating vendors that the better data that we obtain up front, the better results we'll be able to deliver to you.
And speed too, right?
And speed, absolutely. That's a critical factor.
Yeah. Dwell on that for just a second, right? Like, I understand that, data sampling and extrapolation is an industry standard. Doesn't matter what third party you're talking to. that is something that is standard to get started with an audit. When we find an issue, what's our typical approach to gathering data to fully test that issue? Maybe expand on that a little bit.
Sure. It is always our intent and our auditors' intent to quantify issues dollar for dollar. At the end of the day, if it's a dollar for dollar quantification, I think everyone just feels better about it, even though our sampling and extrapolation process has been validated and we know that it works.
That's a little bit of a myth around third-party auditing, is people think extrapolation is used for every issue that's identified. And the fact is, no, it's like the sample and then extrapolation helps it's very much the very beginning of validating or disproving that particular issue, right? And what I heard you say when we were talking about like the crunchiness or like a really difficult audit is when you're working with a supplier who doesn't understand that part of the process, that it's really difficult to keep moving that firewall back and to help them understand. It's like the more cooperative or the more data that's provided, the more accurate the audit's going to be, the faster it's going to be, the more opportunity you're going to have to basically show via data either the issue is supported or not supported, right?
Where it gets sticky, as you said, is when you have a vendor that does not want to collaborate with Revenew. We want, as you said, transparency. As we identify issues, we want to be talking to the vendor about it. We want to make sure that we're vetting it, that we're not, on an audit report, that you're not going to have a list of issues, that there's a reason why things were done in a certain way, but we never bothered to ask the question or get a response to it. So the more collaboration we get throughout the process, vendors are happier. At the end of the day.
Do you find like when you're dealing with a supplier for whatever reason they're not willing or able to supply data, do you find that educational process that you were talking about is most of the time, does that end up with the right outcome where it's like, okay, I get it, right? I understand what you're asking for. Is that like is it putting your arm around the person and saying let's walk through this together? Is that how you get to the right outcome?
Sometimes we just agree to disagree, and we say, let's get started. And as issues come up, we'll just handle it on a case-by-case basis and say, we may not be seeing eye to eye at this stage, but we do need to move forward. And as part of, maintaining that relationship for our clients as well. Sometimes we just make that decision. We're going to move forward. Our client does have a contractual right in their contract to perform this audit. Yep. We're not 100% seeing eye to eye right now, so let's just take it step by step. And we may pause at some point, have some deeper conversations, and then determine what the next step needs to be.
If you get to that point where it's like, okay, look, we can't really align on everything, and we just need to we need to take a step forward, and we're going to start testing with the data that we have. Do you find like that transparent communication with the suppliers you're going through it, even under those circumstances, does that help deliver the right outcome?
Absolutely. From the revenue side, we want to make sure that the vendor is not surprised at any step of the process. So we will continue with our transparency on what we're finding, on asking questions. We may not always get back the feedback that we're looking for, but for our clients and for the vendors, it is always revenue intent to continue with that transparency.
I think if you go back to the first part of the question, which is like, how do you navigate your way through that? What I'm hearing you say, it's like consistent, clear communication, really a partnership with Revenew and the supplier being audited. And even if we can't agree on everything, that transparency and that consistent communication will drive the best possible result.
Absolutely. And one of the things I just wanted to add is, vendors are often surprised that we, as a company, also want to make this process easy for them. So, I can speak specifically to audit planning. We try to take as much as the burden off of the supplier as well as of our customer. So there are certain instances where we're performing an audit and the level of data that we're hoping to get just doesn't exist. And we will work with the vendors, whether that be on hundreds of Excel spreadsheets. We'll say, send it to us. Revenue will do the work of putting this information together so that you don't have to do it. We understand that you have day-to-day operations and an audit is an addition to your day-to-day operations. So we try to do that as much as possible for suppliers as well as our customers.
It needs to be an easy button somewhere in the middle of the table, because that's exactly what I think I just heard you say, is we try to make it easy on the suppliers, easy for our clients, and we try to do all the heavy lifting.
And that builds the relationship that we're talking about and that trust.
Yeah.
You know, if at the end of an audit, a supplier feels like, okay, I was treated fairly, Revenew did, and my customer try to make this process as easy as possible. You know, the next time that we come back and we have to work with them, that trust has been built.
Yeah, I think that's critical. That's definitely a cornerstone, that trust between Revenew and the supplier community. When we're thinking about how we manage communication, right? Like one of the things that I recall hearing very often when I first engaged with Revenew was, look, we'll match whatever sort of cadence you want for communication, but our goal is to do all of the heavy lifting. Can you tell me from your perspective, what makes the perfect client as it relates to their engagement with planning and the program?
I would say most of our clients, not just a perfect client, but, you know, all of our clients are perfect.
Of course, yes.
But, you know, typically we want to be touching base with our customer at least every couple of weeks so that we can get ahead of any potential issues that are coming up and also make sure that they are aware of where we stand with every project, with every audit. Some move faster than others. Some require more involvement than others. So making sure that we are keeping our executive sponsor abreast of everything that's going on. We also try to make that communication process as easy as possible. We typically set up, you know, every couple of weeks, we have a status call, 30 minutes to the point. Let's touch on what really needs to be talked about. You know, from time to time, we do have situations that require more involvement from our customers. You know, that typically comes with difficult vendors that we just talked about, where we're not seeing eye to eye. We want to make sure that, you know, the strategy that we're following is in alignment with what our customer wants. And also when it comes to settlements, right? We haven't talked about settlements, but we always want to make sure that at the end of the day, we are supporting our customers as part of the settlement, that we are playing the role that they're looking for us to play.
Every client has got to be a little bit different, right? So how do you adjust your communication style or the reporting that you provide for everybody? Do we have kind of like, here's best practices, you figure out how to implement that? Or do we take the approach where it's more, why don't you tell us what you'd like, and then we'll recommend how our best practices could fit within your model? So if those are the two bookends, kind of like, how do you approach it when you're working with somebody new?
So when we start off a program, you know, we have sponsors that right off the bat say, hey, I want to get an update once a week. And what they often find is that with vendor audits specifically, sometimes there's not as much movement in certain stages from week to week. So I'll probably say, you know, when we're starting off a program, a client typically has in mind already what they envision, how frequent they envision the update. But as we move through the program, I would probably say 9 out of 10 times we end up in that, you know, kind of every couple of weeks stage.
Yeah.
We just, you know, we've found that that's typically the right fit, not only from a timeline, from the quality of the updates. We don't want to go too long between updates.
Sure.
We don't want to make sure that, you know, things that they need to be talked about are not just sitting and waiting for that conversation to take place. We want to be proactive. But as a company, as a audit planning team, we are looking for, at the end of the day, to match the pace that our customer wants. So if a customer has something specific in mind, we will deliver based on what they're looking for.
So it sounds like we've got some like best practices. We've got some pretty good ideas about what the right cadence is and what kind of communication is really valuable, but we're very flexible on how we approach, you know. Okay, right on, love it. So I want to switch gears a little bit. What I'd like to talk about with you is the global economy, how things are changing, and what impact that's having on our clients.
You know, what we're seeing across the board is, you know, a lot of our clients have contracts that they have spent a significant amount of time negotiating. that allows for time increases and decreases as the market goes up and down. I think the biggest focus right now is, as raw material cost is increasing, is to make sure that our clients are only seeing the increases that are specific to what the contract allows. I think that has become an area of increased concern, I would say, for most of our customers across various industries. It's not specific to a single industry. We have, as a company, Revenew, have been able to bring back the validation and making sure that are there areas that we foresee in the future. Our clients need to be spending a little bit more time when they negotiate contracts to make sure that those increases, those tariffs are not costs that they're going to be absorbing at the end of the day.
So with that in mind, like with the escalation or de-escalation clauses in contract, is there anything that our clients should be doing proactively right now to make sure that their suppliers are basically following their agreements? What advice would you give the client right now as far as it relates to that?
Really, to make sure that at the end of the day, if you've taken the time to negotiate a contract that has escalation and de-escalations, that you do have definition around whether it be raw material cost, what can be included in that cost and what should be excluded. Also, if it is an index-based escalation or de-escalation, that you have that well-defined in the contract. There are different indexes that could be used, but we want to see a contract be specific. We want to see the index that it is to be used. Should it be used based on the prior months or 2 months down the road, or 2 months looking back? With a volatile market, we're seeing a lot of ups and downs that a month can make a difference. So making sure that you're specifying exactly what that process should look like is really what our clients should be focused on.
So if we're thinking about like big spend categories with this in mind, where there's escalation, de-escalation clauses in there, what do you typically see? Is it done like on a quarterly basis, a monthly basis? How often are companies supposed to be taking a look at their contracts and adjusting the pricing with their suppliers?
I think what we've seen the most really in the past 10 years is quarterly. But I'll probably say as you know, with the inflation and the market being a little bit more volatile, we may see an adjustment to monthly. As prices start going down, that our clients are also seeing the benefits of it as well.
Yeah.
The suppliers are protected as cost goes up, but our clients want to see the benefit as well once things start to calm down a little bit.
So how often when we're doing an audit and we're getting ready to do some testing around escalation, de-escalation clauses, how often are you finding that our clients are actually following them to the letter?
What we find is that, you know, suppliers do have a process. They are paying attention to it. You know, you can expect with any company, we're also seeing a lot of changes when it comes to humans, you know, people switching positions, leaving a company, a lot of hiring, layoffs. And with that, a lot of institutional knowledge is leaving the company.
Yeah.
So you may have someone that sat in that role with the supplier that handled those escalations and de-escalations for the past 10 years. And then all of a sudden, you have someone new in that seat. A very small spreadsheet error on a relationship of that size, when you're talking about that kind of spend, will mean a significant error at the end of the day from a monetary standpoint. So it could be a very small error, could lead to a pretty significant recovery.
Yeah. Well, and I'm thinking back to my old supply chain management days, where that was one of the things that whenever it was a market where, you know, costs were skyrocketing, of course, you know, as the client, as the owner of those contracts, we were very attuned to getting with the suppliers and talking to them and making sure they were in place. You know, suppliers on the other side of the table they weren't excited to have those conversations with us. So they didn't initiate them, right? So if you were talking to one of our clients that had these clauses in there, what advice would you give them, using that scenario that you just talked about, where it's like there's something that happened internally, maybe it hasn't been as closely managed as it was in the previous years. What advice would you give those clients as far as how they could make sure they're capturing all that benefit that they wrote into their agreement?
Be proactive, especially when it comes to that validation process. I think that as kind of the changes that we talked a little bit about, it's not something that our clients hear. They may have someone new handling their escalations and de-escalations, which is something, it makes a big impact in the overall relationship, but our clients may never hear about it. They get the spreadsheet, they just assume it's the same person doing it, and they have never had a problem in the past, so they may say, hey, I trust this process. But having checks, at least on a yearly basis, and doing a deep dive, and typically an audit is the best way to do it. You have an independent party that is familiar with that vendor, that has worked with them in the past, looking and doing a deep dive, and not only making sure that the process that's been established is still being followed by the vendor, but also as the market changes, that we are addressing those changes in the contract as well. Is there something else that the contract, when it was negotiated 3, 4, 5 years ago, didn't address, that now looking forward, we really need to pay attention to?
Sure. So the operating environment inside of the client may have changed, and the contract, was written in a way where maybe it didn't follow that operational change quite precisely, and they need to make some adjustments, and audit's a great way of finding that out. That's what I'm hearing. Is that mostly right?
You're exactly right.
Right on. Juliana, this has been really amazing. Thank you so much for your time today. It's been educational for me, and I hope we get to do it again sometime soon. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Jeff. I really appreciate it.
That wraps up the first 4-part season of Revving with Revenew. We'll be back in 2026 with season 2. More conversations, insights, and strategies to uncover value. In the meantime, connect with us on LinkedIn or visit revenew.com to stay engaged. Thank you so much for joining us.